special Warp into War deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are pulling from a stack of articles today covering some massive news, which is Warhammer Classics. Basically, 7 legendary games are finally hitting Steam for the very first time.
Starting with the sheer brutal realism of Shadow of the Horned Rat, which is from 1995.
Oh yeah, the very first real-time strategy game in the Warhammer fantasy universe.
Yeah, you command the Grudgebringer's mercenary army against this Skaven plot. And reading these articles dealing with the permadeath and the troop payroll, it sounds less like heroic fantasy and more like running a highly stressful, heavily armored small business.
It really was. But think about why they did that. On a physical tabletop, losing a miniature hurts because you spend hours painting it, right?
Obviously.
Digitally, they replicated that pain through your profit margins. If your veteran cavalry died, they were gone. Every tactical choice felt incredibly heavy.
So they nailed the stakes. But how do you handle the sheer scale? Because Final Liberation. Warhammer Epic 40,000 comes out in 1997, and it trades swords for towering sci-fi titans.
Yeah, a huge shift to the sci-fi universe. It translates that massive tabletop scale into turn-based tactics where you command titans against orc hordes.
But look, I have to ask. The articles mention these live-action full-motion video cutscenes. Doesn't that just reek of pure 90s cheese? Like, why is that celebrated?
I mean, sure, it's easy to call it cheese now, but back then, taking massive tabletop rules and putting them into digital tactics felt almost clinical.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, those 90s live-action scenes injected desperately needed humanity and atmosphere into the sheer scale of fighting giant mechs.
Fair enough. But let me push back on another piece of vintage charm here. Dark Omen comes along in 1998 as the direct sequel to Horned Rat, right?
Exactly, a campaign against the undead. And it brought in 3D terrain and true line of sight, meaning your archers couldn't magically shoot through hills anymore.
Right. But reviewers in these articles also point out these unforgiving, notoriously long meta-loading screens. You call it foundational, I call it jank. Why do players revere a game that actively punishes them?
Well, you call it jank, but I call it consequence. Modern games condition you to expect safety nets, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Dark Omen's line of sight meant the physical terrain actually mattered for the first time. The unforgiving nature made victory against the undead feel earned, like a true struggle.
Okay, so if they cracked the code on punishing grand strategy, why shrink everything down for Chaos Gate that same year? It's isometric squad combat, Ultramarines versus Chaos Wordbearers.
Because isometric games where the camera is pulled up and to the side, they give you that perfect tabletop-like view, forcing you to think 3 moves ahead.
Oh, right.
Plus, they added RPG progression. Your individual Space Marines gained experience, so you got attached to them.
Which shifts the tension from will I win the war to will my favorite sniper survive this turn?
Exactly.
And clearly, they kept experimenting with how to build these digital tabletops. Because Rites of War in 1999 completely shifts gears and uses the Panzer General II engine.
Right.
Why adopt a totally different engine to play as the alien Eldari against Tyranids?
Because that engine relied on a hex grid. It forced players to treat combat like a complex game of spatial chess, not just a mindless clickfest.
Using a glory point system, right?
Yeah, positioning on those hexes meant life or death, which perfectly fit the tactical elegance of the Eldari.
Which makes the 2003 release of Fire Warrior so shocking.
Yeah.
They throw the chessboard out the window.
A radical pivot.
Yeah, it's a fast-paced first-person shooter where you play as a Tau warrior on this brutal 24-hour descent into chaos. Instead of looking down at the battlefield like a god, you are down in the mud fighting the Imperium and demons.
Exactly. It gave players a rare, terrifying ground-level view of how horrifying the 41st millennium actually is for just one soldier.
Speaking of surviving impossible odds down in the mud, if you want to help us survive the algorithms, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We always appreciate the support.
All right, back to the digital tabletop. The ultimate refinement in these articles seems to be Mark of Chaos from 2006, a massive return to fantasy real-time strategy, but they completely ditched base building.
Yeah, they really did.
Feels like they skipped the vegetables to get straight to the dessert of tactical combat.
That's spot on. By removing resource harvesting, you focus entirely on epic, large-scale tactical clashes and intimate hero duels.
Wow.
Plus, it introduced deep unit customization. You could literally swap body parts and paint banners. They finally brought the digital experience as close to the physical tabletop hobby as possible.
That was all for us. Did you play any of these games?
You know, looking back at all of this, it leaves you with an interesting question.
Oh.
Yeah. Since modern games often rely so heavily on handholding, does the enduring cult appeal of these ruthlessly difficult classic mechanics suggest that today's gamers are actually starving for a true, uncompromising challenge?